The ballroom was filled with Seoul's most powerful people: politicians, crime families, billionaires who controlled the city without ever running for office. Sophia walked in holding her daughter and immediately wished she hadn't, because Jae-won-oh was there. She saw him before he saw her: dark suit, silver watch, the same stillness he always carried, the kind that made rooms reorganize themselves around him without anyone deciding to do it. She turned immediately toward the registration desk. If she could get her name badge and cross to the foundation table on the far side, she would not have to exist in the same part of the room as him at all. She did not make it. He appeared at her side the way dangerous men appear, without sound, without warning. "You should not be here." Sophia turned to face him. "I was invited." He looked at her the way he had looked at her the last night she had spent in their apartment. Like a problem he had already solved, like something that had been decided. "I don't know this woman," loudly enough for the people nearest to them to hear, loudly enough to be a statement and not just a sentence. "She needs to leave." 400 people went quiet around them. Every eye in the ballroom turned towards Sophia. This was the kind of moment that traveled. Everyone in this room knew who Jae-won-oh was. Everyone understood what it meant when he looked at someone the way he was looking at her. Like she had never mattered. She felt the full public weight of it land on her chest. She lifted her chin. She opened her mouth to respond. And that was when Nari raised her small arm and pointed directly at Jae-won-oh. "That's my daddy." The room stopped breathing. For the first time in 10 years, the most feared man in Seoul looked terrified. "Welcome back, my amazing Korean Storyverse family. To my returning subscribers and to everyone joining us for the first time, it is so good to have you here. If you are new, kindly hit that subscribe button right now and join the family. You do not want to miss what is coming. Now, let us get into the story." He looked at the child the way you look at something that rearranges everything you thought you knew about your own life. Her eyes were his, not similar, exactly his, the same depth, the same angle, the same quality of looking directly at a thing without flinching that had made people uncomfortable in boardrooms across Seoul for a decade. He looked at her right hand. Just below the knuckle of her index finger, there was a small crescent-shaped birthmark, the color of strong tea. His mother had the same mark. His brother. His own hand carried it in the same location. He knew. He did not need a test or a document or a lawyer's confirmation. He looked at this child who had just said daddy in front of 400 of Seoul's most powerful people, and he knew with the certainty of blood recognizing itself that she was his. He had a daughter. He had a daughter, and he had not known she existed, and she was almost 2 years old, and she had just pointed at him across a crowded ballroom and named him in front of everyone. Around them, the room remained suspended. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. 400 people who controlled cities and moved money across continents were standing completely still, waiting to see what the most feared man in Seoul would do next. Haewon looked at Sophia. "Come with me," he said. His voice was very quiet. Sophia looked at him for a long moment. She was measuring something. He could see her doing it, the same precise way she had always measured things before she moved. "This is not an agreement," she said. "This is a conversation." "I know." She followed him. The room exhaled behind them. He took them to a private lounge on the floor above the ballroom. One of his associates had it open before they arrived, which was how things worked around Jae-won-oh. Rooms appeared when he needed them. He closed the door and stood near the window with the Han River lit up far below, and he looked at Nari, who was sitting on Sophia's hip, examining the room with the thorough interest she brought to new places. Then she saw the watch up close. Her whole face changed. She reached out both arms toward him. Not asking, expecting, the way children reach for things they have already decided belong to them. Chaewon looked at Sophia. Sophia gave him nothing. No permission and no refusal. She simply watched. He took the child. Nari settled against his chest with the immediate ease of someone arriving somewhere they had been trying to get to for a long time. She grabbed his wrist with both small hands and examined the watch with the focused concentration of a scholar confirming something important. "Crack," she said, tracing the dent in the silver casing with one finger. "Yes," Chaewon said. His voice came out differently than he intended. "My cup has a crack," Nari said. She looked up at him with his own eyes. "Mama says it still works." He looked at this child in his arms. at the birthmark on her hand, at the face that was watching him with complete trust and zero strategy. He had missed almost 2 years of her life. He pressed his mouth together and looked at the window and breathed slowly. "How old is she?" he said. "Almost 2, Sophia said. He did the calculation. He felt it land. "You knew when you left." "I found out 10 days later." "You never told me." Sophia looked at him with the steady clarity of a woman who has been telling the truth for so long she has stopped softening it for other people's comfort. "You believed forged documents over your wife," she said. "You signed the papers without a single investigation. You never called. You never questioned what you had been shown. You simply decided and moved on." She let that sit in the room. "So tell me, Chaewon, what exactly was I supposed to call and say?" He had no answer. She had not expected one. Nari had fallen asleep against his chest. The weight of her was small and complete and entirely undone him in a way that 14 months of marriage and 2 years of silence and all the power he had accumulated across his entire adult life had not prepared him for. He looked down at her sleeping face. "She found the photograph herself," Sophia said, her voice quieter now. "It was in the bottom drawer of my bedside table. She climbed up and found it one afternoon and brought it to me and pointed at your watch and said, 'Watch.' She has been looking at that photograph for 3 months. She knew the watch before she knew your name." Chaewon closed his eyes briefly. "What is her name?" he said. "Nari." He looked at the sleeping child, at the crescent birthmark, at the small fingers still loosely wrapped around his wrist even in sleep. "I did not know," he said. It was not a defense, it was simply the most honest thing he could find. "I know you did not," Sophia said. "That does not change what happened. You had a wife who told you the truth, and you chose not to believe her. The consequences of that choice belong to you." She stood. She held out her arms for Nari. He transferred the sleeping child carefully, the way you handle something. "You understand you have no right to drop." "I want to see her again," he said. Sophia looked at him. "That is not something you are owed." "I know. Rights are built," she said. "You do not have any yet. What you have right now is a chance. Whether that becomes something else depends entirely on what you do with it." He nodded. She walked to the door, then she stopped without turning around. "She calls the watch the picture watch," Sophia said. "She has been waiting to find it in real life for 3 months." She left. He stood alone in the private lounge with the Han River below him and the sound of 400 people resuming their evening 1 floor down and the feeling of a sleeping child's weight still in his arms, even though she was no longer there. He did not sleep that night. He sat in his private residence and looked at nothing and thought about everything. He thought about the documents Director Yoon had placed on his desk 14 months ago. He thought about the conversation he had with Sophia that same evening and how long it had lasted and how certain he had been and how quickly he had moved from certainty to action. He had not investigated. He had not questioned. He had looked at the papers and looked at his wife and chosen the papers. He called Minho at 2 in the morning. "The original file," he said, "the one about Sophia. Pull it tonight. Full metadata analysis. Creation dates, modification records, everything." Minho arrived at 7 the following morning and placed the folder on the desk without speaking. He stood quietly while Chaewon went through it. It did not take long. "2 key documents," Minho said. "The creation timestamps do not match the server logs. Someone built them after the date they claim and backdated them manually. The construction is careful, but the metadata does not lie." Chaewon set the folder down. "Director Yoon," Minho said quietly. The name settled in the room like something heavy dropped from height. Minho continued. "I traced his communications from that period. He was in regular contact with the Seo family. Their eldest daughter had been positioned as a potential match for you for over a year before Sophia left. The timeline is precise. Yoon built the evidence, presented it to you, and within 3 months had personally recommended the Seo introduction to your father." Chaewon sat very still. "She had nothing to do with any of it," Minho said. "The one meeting they are pointing to was a professional health conference. She did not know who the man was. There was no coordination. There was no betrayal. There was only a woman doing her job who was then used as a foundation for something constructed around her without her knowledge." Chaewon looked at the documents. He looked at the window. He looked at his own hands. He had ended his marriage in a single conversation on the strength of papers that had been manufactured by a man who needed him to be alone and controllable. He had signed the divorce papers without investigation. He had never called her. He had never questioned what he had been shown. He had simply decided and moved on. And somewhere in a small apartment in the Mapo district, a woman had discovered she was pregnant 10 days after he let her walk out and had built an entire life alone, and had raised his daughter to recognize his watch from a photograph, and had never once spoken a word against him to the child. He picked up his phone. He looked at it for a long time. Then he put it down. She had not given him her number to receive an apology at 7 in the morning from a man she owed nothing. He would go in person. He would go without lawyers and without associates and without the architecture of power he usually carried into rooms. He would go as simply the person who had gotten everything wrong and needed her to know that he knew it. He had Director Yoon brought to him that afternoon. This story will not describe what happened in that room. What matters is what came after. Chae-won walked out with a full documented account of everything that had been done. He took it to his father without softening a single detail. The Oh family patriarch looked at the evidence and was silent in a way that was not power, but was something closer to shame. She was pregnant when she left, Chae-won said. She raised my daughter alone for 2 years in a one-bedroom apartment. She has never said a word against me to the child. Not one word. His father looked at the table. I am going to fix this, Chae-won said. Not for the family, not for the organization, because it is the only honest thing left to do. He went to her apartment that evening. No bodyguards, no associates. He stood at the door of a small building above a Nigerian food shop and knocked and waited like an ordinary person, because that was all he had any right to be in this particular moment. Sophia opened the door. She was holding a small pan. Nari was visible behind her in the kitchen, standing on a step stool at the counter with a very serious expression. We are making eggs, Sophia said. I am sorry to come without calling. Come in, she said. Nari has been telling Auntie Bisi about her daddy since this morning, and I could use some confirmation that you are a real person. He came in. The apartment was small and warm and smelled of cooking oil and something clean that was entirely hers. Drawings taped to the kitchen wall at a height that told you exactly how tall Nari was. A pair of Sophia's shoes near the door, with one leaning against the other. A life built for living in, not for showing. Nari looked up from the step stool and saw him. Her face did what it had done in the ballroom. The immediate settling of recognition. The arrival of something expected and confirmed. She held out her wooden spoon. You can stir, she said. He stirred the eggs. They ate at the small table by the window, the 3 of them, with the city quiet outside. Nari carried most of the conversation. She had strong opinions about eggs and about a child at daycare named Bora, who took things without asking, which she considered a serious moral failure. She had questions about whether the moon got tired. She had a theory about clouds that she shared with the confidence of someone who has thought about it carefully and reached a firm conclusion. She argues about everything at dinner, Sophia said, and there was something in the way she said it, not performed, not for his benefit, just the real exhausted warmth of a woman who has been doing this alone and built something genuine from it, that made him look at her for a moment longer than dinner required. She did not look back, but the corner of her mouth moved. After Nari was in bed, Chae-won having read her 2 stories at her insistence and sat beside her until she fell asleep mid-sentence about the moon, Sophia made tea and they sat at opposite ends of the small sofa, and he told her everything. The metadata, the backdated documents, Director Yoon, the CEO family, the full timeline. He went through all of it without minimizing and without editorializing. And she listened the way she always listened, with her whole attention, in a way that made you feel both fully seen and fully accountable. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I know. He looked at her. Not all of it, she said. But I knew something had been built around me. I knew because I knew myself. And because the man who believed it without investigation was not the man I thought I had married. So I had to decide which was real, the documents or the man I knew. And I decided I had been wrong about the man. She said it without self-pity, without accusation, as a fact she had made peace with. It was easier than the alternative, she said. If I had kept believing in you, I would have waited. And I could not wait. I had Nari to build a life for. Chae-won set down his cup. He looked at his hands, at the watch, at the birthmark below his knuckle that his daughter carried in the same location on her own small hand. "What do you need from me?" he said. Sophia looked at him for a long moment. "Nari needs a father," she said. "Not a name, not a resource. A person who shows up consistently, who learns how she likes her eggs and which stories she wants at bedtime, and why Bora taking things without asking is a matter of serious principle to her. Someone who understands she comes first. Before everything else." "Yes," he said, "and I need to trust you," she said. "I do not yet. I am not going to pretend I do to make this easier for either of us. Trust is built the same way everything real is built, slowly and without guarantee." "I understand. I know you do," she said. And this time she looked at him with something that was not yet trust, but was its honest beginning. Two people in a small apartment with a sleeping child in the next room, telling each other the truth for the first time in 2 years. It was not a happy ending. It was something harder and more real than that. It was a beginning. He came every Tuesday and every Saturday. On Tuesdays, he picked Nari up from daycare and walked her home, stopping at the steamed bun cart on the corner that she had been observing with serious intent for months. On Saturdays, he arrived at 9 in the morning and stayed through the afternoon, learning the shape of their life without trying to rearrange it. He learned that Nari liked her eggs fully cooked, not soft. He learned she needed 2 minutes of quiet after waking before any conversation was possible, a requirement she enforced without apology. He learned about Captain, the one-eared rabbit who must be treated with complete respect. In the 3rd week, Nari hugged him. Not because anyone told her to, not because the moment called for it in any way that an adult would have planned. She simply finished her steamed bun on the walk home, wiped her hands on her jacket, turned and wrapped both arms around his leg and pressed her face against it for approximately 4 seconds. Then she let go and kept walking and said, "Come on, the leaves are the good ones here." He stood on that pavement for a moment before he followed her. That evening he sat in his car outside the building for 10 minutes before driving away. In the 2nd month, she fell asleep on him. It was a Saturday afternoon, and they had been reading on the sofa, and Sophia was on a call in the bedroom, and Nari had simply lain sideways against his arm with the total confidence of a child who trusts that the person beside her will not move. He had not moved. He had sat completely still for 40 minutes while she slept, and he looked at the drawings on the wall and the boarding pass bookmark in Sophia's book on the table, and he thought about every Tuesday and Saturday he had not known existed, and he let himself feel the full weight of that without looking away from it. Sophia came out of the bedroom and stopped in the doorway. She looked at them for a moment. She said nothing. She went to the kitchen and made tea. She put a cup on the table within his reach without being asked. He looked at the cup. He looked at her. She had already turned back to the counter. That was the first crack in the wall she had built. Neither of them said so, but they both knew. In the 3rd month, Nari fell at the park. It was not a serious fall, a scraped knee, the kind that produces enormous noise relative to the actual damage. But she was crying the full immediate cry of a child in pain, and she looked up from the ground, and through her tears she said one word. "Daddy." Not Mama. "Daddy." Chaewon was already crouching beside her. He picked her up and held her and said, "I have you. I have you. You are okay." He said it quietly and steadily until the crying slowed and became the hiccuping aftermath, and she pressed her face against his neck and held on. Sophia stood a few steps away and watched and did not trust herself to speak. That evening, after Nari was in bed, she sat on the balcony with her tea going cold, and she admitted to herself what she had been managing for 3 months, the tea at the right temperature that he had made without being told how she took it, the way he said her name on the phone that one evening, the way he had not moved for 40 minutes while Nari slept on his arm. She admitted that what she had been calling caution had started to look from the inside like fear. And the fear was not of him. She sat on the balcony for a long time. She thought about the hospital room, about every form signed alone, about every 3 in the morning she had handled without anyone beside her. She had built a self that required no one, and she had been proud of that self, and she was not willing to dismantle it for a man who had chosen documents over her word. But she also thought about Nari on the ground at the park, saying "Daddy" before she said anything else. She thought about what she stood to lose, not her own strength, but her daughter's access to this man who was learning slowly and genuinely and without performance to be present. She went inside. She went to bed. She thought, "You already know what you are deciding. The balcony is where you come when you already know." The call came on a Thursday night in the fifth month at 11:47. Minho's voice was steady in the specific way it went steady when things were serious. They know about the apartment, Jae-won, the PIO network. Someone talked. They have the address. Jae-won was already on his feet. The PIO network had been watching his reduced operations, his Tuesday afternoons, his Saturday mornings. The way a man who had built an empire on absolute availability had started being unavailable on very specific days. They had read it as weakness. They had found the apartment through a contact and connected it to him. He made 4 calls in under 3 minutes. The 5th call was to Sophia. She answered on the 2nd ring. Voice level. Because she was Sophia. Take Nari to the back room now, he said. Lock the interior door. Do not open it for anyone until I call you again. A pause. How bad? Working on it. Go now. She went. He heard the footsteps and the door and the click of the lock, and then nothing, because Sophia did not make noise when she was afraid. The situation was handled in 35 minutes by the security team he had positioned in the neighborhood weeks earlier without telling her. 2 men from the PIO network were intercepted 3 streets from the building. No one was hurt. The street was cleared. He arrived at the apartment at 12:40. Sophia opened the door with Nari on her hip. The child was half asleep and confused and holding Captain the one-eared rabbit with both hands. Sophia's face was completely composed. This was the thing about her that he had been watching for months and still could not entirely absorb. Her composure was not distance. It was a woman who had learned to function inside fear because she had spent 2 years in which the alternative was not available to her. Is she okay? He said. She is fine. She does not understand what happened. She thinks it was a fire drill. Sophia looked at him. Are you okay? He looked at her. No, he said. It was the most honest thing he had said in years. She stepped back from the door. She let him in. He sat at the kitchen table while she settled Nari back to sleep. He sat and looked at the drawings on the wall and the one-eared rabbit that Nari had left on the counter, and the 2 cups already on the table that Sophia had put there before she came back, which meant she had decided something in the bedroom before she returned to the room. She sat down across from him. They found the apartment, he said. I heard you on the phone. This is my world, he said. It will keep finding you, both of you. I have been telling myself I can manage it, that the protection is enough. He stopped. Tonight told me something different. Sophia was quiet. I am stepping down, he said, from everything. Sophia looked at him across the small table. She looked at him for a long time. That is not a small thing, she said. I know. Your family, your organization, everything you have built. Yes. You cannot do this for us, she said. You have to do it for yourself, or it will not hold. He met her eyes. It is for myself. I built all of it because I did not know what else to do with who I was. I do not want to be that person anymore. I stopped wanting to be that person. The first Tuesday I walked Nari home from daycare, and she spent 20 minutes telling me why the clouds looked like animals, and I was more present in that conversation than I had been in any boardroom in 10 years. Sophia pressed her lips together. Give me until morning, she said. She got up. She went to the linen cupboard and came back with a pillow and a folded blanket and set them on the end of the sofa without ceremony. He slept on the sofa. In the morning she came out of the bedroom and went to the kitchen and made 2 cups of tea. She put one in front of him. That was her answer. The transition took 37 days. It was not simple. There were structural arrangements and internal negotiations and the establishment of legitimate successor leadership that he and Minho had actually been quietly preparing for months before that Thursday night accelerated the timeline. 3 senior associates resigned. 2 came to him privately and said they had been waiting for someone to do this. His father said nothing useful. The organization press called it weakness. Jae-won read none of it. He was at the Tuesday pickup. He was at the Saturday morning. He was there at 8 o'clock when Nari climbed the step stool and called him. The day the transition was formally complete, Nari called at 8 as usual. Good night, Daddy, she said. Good night, baby, he said. He sat in his newly rented apartment in the Mapo district, small and quiet, near the Han River, which he had chosen because it was the neighborhood where he had first understood what he was actually fighting for. And he felt the specific quiet of a man who has put something large down after carrying it for a very long time. The restaurant opened on a Thursday in early spring, 7 months later. It was small. 12 tables, an open kitchen. Walls painted the color of warm stone, with a mural that Nari had helped design. A map of two coastlines with a child standing between them, with one hand reaching toward each sea. The menu had been tested and argued over and revised many times. The jollof rice served alongside doenjang jigai, the suya spiced grilled pork that Nari had named the good meat and which had remained on the menu under exactly that name because no one could improve on it. Sophia's mother had flown in from Lagos to settle the West African side of the menu with the authority of a woman who does not negotiate on matters she considers resolved. The sign above the door read Nari's, not because the restaurant was about her, because everything they had built carefully and slowly from what remained after the worst of it was. 1 year after the ballroom. The restaurant was full on a Saturday afternoon, regulars at their usual tables. Nari, now 3 years old, was moving between tables with menus held in both hands and the very serious expression of someone performing an important professional duty. Chaewon was at the stove, Sophia was at the small desk in the corner with the afternoon's orders. It was ordinary and warm and entirely theirs. Nari came into the kitchen and climbed the step stool, the same one from the apartment, brought over because she had been specific about its necessity. She looked at Chaewon with the expression she wore when something important was being considered. "Appa," she said. "Yes." She looked at Sophia. She looked at Chaewon. She looked at the restaurant through the kitchen pass-through, at the tables full of people eating food that came from both of the worlds she had been born between. Then she looked back at them both and she said, with the complete seriousness of someone who has thought about this carefully and reached a conclusion, "Can we all live in the same house now?" The kitchen went quiet. Sophia looked at Chaewon. He looked at Sophia. Something passed between them that did not need words, the accumulated weight of 2 years of Tuesdays and Saturdays and 8 o'clock phone calls and one Thursday night and a cup of tea, placed on a table as an answer, and a child who had crossed a ballroom and pointed at the right person before either of them had the courage to. Chaewon reached across and took Sophia's hand where it rested on the desk. She turned her palm and held on. He looked at Nari on the step stool. "We are working on it," he said. Nari looked at their joined hands. She looked at them for a moment with the assessment of someone reviewing progress against a known objective. Then she nodded, satisfied, picked up her menus and went back out to the tables. Sophia looked at their joined hands. Then she looked at him. He was already looking at her. This story began with a divorce that was supposed to be final, with a man who chose the wrong thing and a woman who left with nothing and built everything. It began with a child who had not yet learned that some doors are supposed to stay closed and who walked through the most important one in red shoes, carrying a photograph she had memorized and a certainty that belonged only to the very young and the very right. It did not end with a rescue. It ended with a restaurant full of people and a 3-year-old performing professional duties and 2 people who had chosen the harder thing on purpose. That is the whole of it. If this story moved you, if you felt the weight of that small arm pointing across a ballroom, if you heard that question about living in the same house somewhere in your chest, then leave a comment right now and tell me which moment got you. Subscribe if you are not already part of this family. Like this video if it was worth your evening. Every single one of those means more than you know. See you in the next one.